Hello, welcome back. I haven't made a book video in a while. Today I'm going to be talking about several different books. A lot of them are short story collections. You can see them here. And been reading a good amount. It's interesting. My book taste is well, not my book taste, but I've been finding some books that are less popular. I took an Irish literature course this last spring semester, and so there's some books from that class that I really enjoyed. So the first book that I've read here is Memoirs of Hadrian by Marguerite Yourcenar, I would assume. She's Brussels born, like a prodigy almost. It's interesting. The book opens up and like you have the description here. It's like an introduction on the author. Okay, and it goes, her mother was Belgian and her father was French. Her mother died shortly after her birth and she was brought up and educated by her father. She was reading Racine and Aristophanes by the age of 8, and her father taught her Latin at 10 and Greek at 12. Different, right? Different gravy. But this is a little bit of, it's a bit strange. So Marguerite Yourcenar has written memoirs, poems, novels, essays, just about anything you can imagine. She has written it, and she's kind of well regarded in France, especially, and Belgium, of course, the French-speaking, the Francophone world, for being a legendary author. And she had done extensive research on Hadrian, but as well as just the period itself and Rome. And there's so much research that went into this book. There's so many editions and manuscripts that were burned, and it just restarted this novel so many times. And it still lies kind of awkward, and that's a bit unfortunate. But it seems to me like the astonishing amount of research is actually to the detriment of this as a body of work, as a memoir or as a novel, because this is fiction. It's considered fiction, but it's historical fiction, but it's so dense in information, and it's attempting to be a memoir. So it's as if you're reading Hadrian's letters to Marcus. And if we actually just had a compilation of Hadrian's letters to Marcus, it would be nonfiction, and it would be essentially like a Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. But we don't have those letters, and instead it's fictionalized, right? And she's compiling all this information she has about Hadrian and all this research she's done about who he is, about the things he was into, and she's written a memoir in the form of letters. But the problem is that, one, if I got letters this long from someone, I mean, obviously a Roman emperor passing it down, you keep it as like a scripture to reference and go back to. But it's the Sabo meme. I'm not reading that shit. Like, come on, bro. And that kind of is a problem, because the way it's being told, it's like Hadrian is just giving us details of his life, but it's a letter. So it reads weird. It was quite obvious that sentences were just transformed bullet point facts, rewritten in a way so it sounds like I'm telling so-and-so something. So yeah, the extensive amount of research in this novel, I think actually is to its detriment, because within the letter format, we have this issue where so much information is being gurgitated out. And you can almost see the bullet point facts behind these sentences, and how like these sentences are just transformed into a way where it's now memoir, right? And you're writing a letter. So it's like, fact, Hadrian was this years old, he established this library. And then the sentence of the memoir would be like, at this point in my life, I had decided that it was time to establish this. And my goal was this and this and this. And then I'll move on to the next thing and talk about it that way. And it just doesn't seem like something you would put in a personal letter to somebody who's going to take the throne. And the book felt very repetitive towards the middle and the end because of this. It just kind of felt like I'm reading bullet points in a memoir, in a letter form, but it's been artificially altered to fit that style, even though it doesn't actually fit that style. So the strongest parts of this book to me were at the beginning. Page 29 specifically in this version. I'll read it to you. I have it here. Yeah, Hadrian outlines what the means of evaluating the human existence. I thought this was very interesting. Like everyone else, I have at my disposal only three means of evaluating human existence: the study of self, which is the most difficult and the most dangerous method, but also the most fruitful; the observation of our fellow men, who usually arrange to hide their secrets from us, or to make us believe that they have secrets where none exist; and the third, books, with the particular errors of perspective to which they inevitably give rise. And then in the later pages, there is, well, in continuation there, he breaks down each of these methods with their strengths and shortcomings. And there are aspects to the book that I like that. They kind of, break down some interesting ideas, interesting perspectives from a Roman emperor, but overall, I felt like it was so information dense that for a fiction, it kind of became a weakness. And the book got very repetitive towards the end. Next book I want to talk about, Foster by Claire Keegan. So this is the second Claire Keegan I've read. I've read Small Things Like These. Loved it. The film was a great adaptation of it as well. This story I didn't like as much, this novella. I still thought it was very strong in terms of, Keegan does this amazing thing where she has some of the best internal dialogue I've read. Her ability to put to words the indescribable, the nonverbal things, that the way humans communicate majority of the time, the emotions behind those nonverbal communications, the tension sometimes, the annoyance, the grievances we hold that we don't really put to words or can't really explain, the times when we feel like we should hold our peace, which is something the next book is really, really good at doing as well, which is also, again, another Irish author. So this was from my class. This book, and Claire Keegan in general, does that incredibly well. The biggest my problem with this book is that it didn't nearly pull me in as much as Small Things Like These. The plot here, I never felt like the character was ever in danger, or if there was ever, nothing was ever rising that was going to kind of destroy this world. It's instead a character that's given a temporary reprise, and then they know the whole time that it won't last forever, and then they're taken away from that. And so you get some beautiful reflections on appreciating something good while they have it, even though it's temporary, and kind of having to accept that you're going to return to a situation that isn't nearly as good. The challenges that come with that as a child, that some people live a much easier life than your own, and all the woes that come with that. Page 14. These are just some amazing lines that Claire Keegan is very good at, again, talking about the nonverbal things. They laugh hard for a moment, then stop. When I follow the woman back inside, I want her to say something, to put my mind at ease. Instead, she clears the table, picks up the sharp knife, and stands in the light under the window, washing the blade under the running tap. She stares at me and wipes it clean and puts it away. And reading that by itself, you don't really have a little bit of the tension, but there was some, because you don't know who these people are originally and why this girl's there and why she feels like they're foreigners, and she's so uncomfortable about things that we would never be uncomfortable about in our parents' home. So you kind of get a glimpse of what's happening. And, you find out she's staying with a family that's not hers. And so you get lines like this. This, I know, is where they sleep. And I'm glad, for some reason, that they sleep together. Again, hinting that her own family's relationship and dynamic is a little bit more complicated, this one. And that something as simple as the parents sleeping in the same bed comforts her here. And, kind of brings the contrast to light. As soon as she says this, I realize she's just like everyone else, and wish I was back at home so that all the things I do not understand could be the same as they always are. This is speaking to, there's a comfort in familiar mystery. And when the mysteries in your life become unfamiliar, they are celestial things you're unaccustomed to, suddenly there's a great disturbance. You're perturbed, you're uncomfortable. And it's not even that you don't know what's behind the mystery. It's just that the mystery is novel in it of itself. And so I think that's just a great line. And wish I was back at home so that all the things I do not understand could be the same as they always are. We have The Visitor by Maeve Brennan. This is a quick short novella as well. In the class we did a lot of short novellas. We did some longer form novels, but this book humbled me. She wrote this when she was in her 20s, and aside from the writing being, aspiring, spectacular, the part that's really shocking, let's say, or impressive, is the wizened honesty of the novella. Is what I'm putting as a term. Wizened honesty. It's the transparency, the vulnerability to write about something that's so intimate as, person to person relationships, especially with parents and family members, a broken home, and kind of dealing with that in such an honest and transparent way. You read this and it feels so real. And I'm of the belief that almost everything is autofiction. And this is something that feels so much like that Maeve is drawing from her own experience, that she has to be, because it's so rich and honest. Like we said, she's looking at herself so clearly. The protagonist, her flaws are so visible, and you're annoyed at just about, in different moments of the story, not always, but at different aspects, you're annoyed with just about every single character. And you don't really understand some of the quirks that they have, or the grievances they hold, or some of the resentment they hold towards one another. It just kind of seems unexplainable. Like, why? And just like real life, sometimes these things don't have explanations that we can get to, that people aren't willing to open up in a way where we can discover what those issues are and deal with them. And so this is a story full of people with blockades, with walls in front of them, with their hearts hardened. And you have a character, the protagonist, who's the complete opposite, so open, so vulnerable, so out there to be rejected. And she does by her own family, so then she begins to shield herself in. So on page 84, there's this fantastic passage about running out of time. And this feeling is something I'm sure we have all have felt. She sat down on the edge of her bed. Her eyes were wide open, and she felt quiet. She shivered with the cold and yawned. She fell forward with her face in the soft pillow. Now the evening lifted away from her, and she looked at it in despair. Now the evening lifted away from her, and she looked at it in despair. That's great. That sensation when the day has escaped you. It's truly fantastic. And then another thing that was really interesting too was this relationship of proprietor with the dead and ownership over the dead. Nobody owns the dead, but there was a huge aspect of this book was family members wanting to take control and own the dead, their memories, the belongings they left behind, who gets to interpret their life and add meaning to what they said. There was a real gripe between the two characters of who had the right to do that. And you have this older maternal figure in the story who is having a dictator, is authoritarian when it comes to the memories and the belongings of the person who had passed. That belongs to both. If anything, it belongs to both because they're both related to this person, but nobody owns it and nobody has the right to determine that. But it was very interesting. Next up, I have God Has No Grandchildren by Kim Kyung-uk, is how I'm pronouncing it. I'm not entirely too sure. And this is a collection of short stories by this Korean author. I have failed to find anything else by this author. Professor of Creative Writing at the Korea National University of Arts. So, yeah, it's translated by Kang Sunok and Melissa Thompson. It's fantastic. I absolutely love this. This is one of my favorite books, period. God Has No Grandchildren. Absolutely amazing. There's strong commentary on Korean culture. There's incredible world building in such a short amount of time. You're at the edge waiting for the last final words to understand the story, like a sentence in German. That's like the analogy I used here. And yeah, some of these stories are very bizarre. You don't really understand what's happening until the very end, and some not even at the end do you understand them. One that was particularly disturbing, and I found it quite incredible that they took this plot and they made it disturbing, is The Runner. And I even wrote here terrifying. It's essentially about this couple going on a bike ride, and this mysterious, ominous figure is running behind them, but he's constantly behind them, and he just, the boy's in the front pedaling, and the girl's like behind him holding on. And they just hear 99%. This is one of those stories where the ending's like one of two things, and I really wish I had somebody that had read it, because we would either agree or debate to the end of the earth of which interpretive ending is the correct one. And it's amazing. It's at the same time commentary on Korea's work culture. The ending is so great, and you're really left like on one of the sides strongly. There's evidence for both. It's whether or not the main protagonist knew this person or didn't, and it's just sort of like a mystery here. So the last, and again, saving, I wouldn't say these two are my absolute favorites. These are different sides of the globe. We have Korean and American collection of short stories. Again, indie publishers. I found this one on Dalkey. I found this one on Seven Stories Press, and I just picked this because of the name and the cover. I don't know. It's such a beautiful gray finish. I don't know. It just looks great, and I was like, okay, American author writing about Cuba. Interesting. It was not necessarily about Cuba, but the characters do go to Cuba sporadically. But this collection of short stories, unlike this one, they have a synchronicity to them. All of them center around this young boy called Roy, and each short story will jump from parts of his life from 50 years old to 5. And you see, Gifford has a talent for writing through a child's perspective, and that's something that isn't always done well. There's another book here that does it in a comedic way where it's quite ironic, where no child would ever really think like that, and that's kind of the point. It's The Last Samurai, fantastic novel about the difficulties of raising an absolute genius. Like, we're talking 160 IQ, unfathomable levels of genius. It's not meant to be realistic in that sense, but it's a great story. And even the genius struggle with identity crisis and family issues, and that's something that book talks about. But this was fantastic. His ability to write from a child's perspective. It's the way that adults talk about serious things around kids, where it's like, we can understand what's happening, but Roy's misunderstanding of the situation is completely understandable when he's 8 years old, for example. This book also does a great job of not being static in what it talks about, the format of the stories, and even the locations, the setting. One thing in my own short stories when I write them, I've noticed that there's already been some similarities and some defaults in structure and format and how I tend to approach things. Like, I love starting with the end or the middle or the climax, just giving a hint of it and then going back and retelling it through, various different strategies, whether it's a character's memory or somebody interrogating them and having them tell the actual story. That's usually how I've seen the pattern of myself doing that. But here, there's very little pattern of how the stories are told. They kind of approach those stories from several different perspectives, and so that's refreshing. It doesn't get boring. In a collection, there's a lot of short stories. So that's one of the biggest differences as well, is that the short stories here tend to be about 20, sometimes 30 pages, and so there's like 5 of them, 6 of them, but they're all amazing. Here, there are some that are misses, but there's about 7, I'm exaggerating, but most short stories here are 2 pages. And so there's several of them. To highlight some of my favorites, Real Bandits. This taught me about something in Brazilian history that I didn't know about, and I was like, dang, como que eu não sabia disso? Like, no idea. But it is something that most people that, they have their entire education there would have learned about. It's a period in the Sertão where you have these cangaceiros, which were these bandits, and it's about Lampião. So after reading that short story, I did a whole deep dive in this part of Brazilian history that I knew nothing about. And so it was really cool to learn something like that. But there's also just amazing short stories here. You have to read it. I highly recommend. And this is not going to change your life. It's more entertaining. It's not going to give you perhaps I don't know. Every person is their own person, but it's not going to give you like a profound revelation. But it's great. It's great. And if it's great to be reading like on vacation or while doing something. I don't know. I loved it. Those are the books. I'm going to show you them one more time that I've been reading. Amazing. Top tier. Recommend. Memoirs of Hadrian would being the weakest one. Yeah, I'm currently reading Dazai, No Longer Human. Really interesting, disturbing story. And then I'll be reading Red Ants by, I forget the author's name, but I'll talk about that in a future video. So yeah.